This is Lon Winters with Graphic Elephants.
This is Jimmy Lamp.
This is Matt Vassallo with the RhinestoneWorld.com.
And you're listening to the Two Regular Guys podcast.
And you are listening to the Two Regular Guys podcast.
Hosted by...
My name is Terry Combs, RG, regular guy.
And Aaron Montgomery.
We're just regular guys having fun and trying to make a living in this really cool and exciting industry.
I think we all want to succeed 100% of the time.
Seek to understand before I try and make myself understood.
Bring a ton of great information.
Coming to you live from somewhere dark, dirty, and dank.
Well, welcome into the show. It is Friday, June 2nd, 2023. I'm Terry Combs, and you can find me at terrycombs.com.
And I am Erich Campbell, very obviously not Aaron Montgomery sitting in today. And you find me at erichcampbell.com. And today, hopefully, and I'll be very candid about this here shortly, we're going to be talking to Zach Ahorn of Self-Made Designs, and he'll be joining us to talk about being self-made in the screen printing community and his project Print Plugs. Now, this is where I get to be very candid for the both of us. Zach isn't here yet, and this has happened sometimes on live shows. We'll just let you know. We're going to try and get him in when he gets in. If he doesn't get in here, it's not as if Terry and I haven't talked for an hour in front of you guys before, but we always try.
Yeah. And, and I actually did get a text from Zach about 45 minutes ago. He's at Rockfest right now. Yep. And he's going to step away and jump onto the show. So we're hoping he's not having connectivity issues, because that happens in the live shows. All the regulators know when we try to go live. And Eric, you know best when we tried to do the last year from the DAX, or the Two Regular Guys from the DAX show. Aaron and I both fell out, and you had to finish interviewing our guests, which was awesome. Good job.
Well, thank you. Like I said, we make our way. I mean, luckily today we do have something to at least give you some good, solid industry content, because we have our news segment, which I have always enjoyed. And today, of course, Cassie Green from Apparelist is in with us today. So hopefully you guys are here and ready, because there's always something good to listen to from Cassie. All right. Without further ado, folks, let's get to the news.
Yeah, what's up, regulators? Happy to bring you the news again this month. Terry, thanks for reminding me it's June and halfway through 2023. I was not ready for that. So before I get to the news headlines, just going to take a little sip of coffee out of my Two Regular Guys mug. There we go. That's better. So first headline I have for you guys today. More than 500,000 recycled bottles make up world's largest t-shirt. We have covered various Guinness World Records at Apparelist in the past. There's a guy who broke the record for most t-shirts worn during a half marathon, which is, running a half marathon is a feat in and of itself. Now try and put on 90 something t-shirts and do it. So the really cool thing about these Guinness World Records in regards to apparel is usually people do them to support a good cause or promote like something really cool. So for this one, 3 Romanian organizations worked together to create the t-shirt. It measures approximately 357 by 241 feet. If you go to the Apparelist, click on the link, you can see a picture of the shirt. It is absolutely mind-blowing. But as if the size isn't impressive enough, it's made from over 500,000 recycled plastic water bottles. So of course they did this in an effort to really encourage people to recycle, at least, shine a spotlight on the sustainability part of this. Really kind of a cool thing. It took over 3 weeks to collect all the water bottles to make this shirt, and it took about a month for seamstresses to construct the t-shirt. So pretty amazing how all of this came together. Again, click on the link if you want to get all the details about the actual, measurement day where everything was made official. Really neat story there. Second headline I have for all of you regulators: Champion named new apparel partner for Shop for a Cause initiative. The National Federation of State High School Associations, try and say that 10 times fast. We're just going to use the acronym going forward, NFHS. So NFHS is a group that advocates for high school athletics as well as fine and performing arts programs. They announced a multi-year agreement with Champion Athletic Wear as the official American Cancer Society for the NFHS fundraising. That's really convoluted. So let me kind of break that down, what it means. So basically, as the partner, Champion currently has an online storefront that serves high school teams, fans, local communities, with all of the proceeds benefiting the American Cancer Society. And again, this is in tandem with NFHS fundraising. So I like to share stories like these because not only does it spotlight the current human rights and good deeds that are happening in the apparel industry, but hopefully it inspires some of you decorators out there who might be passionate about a certain cause or nonprofit or whatever, to look for ways to use your apparel prowess to serve the community. So really neat. Again, love to share these inspiring stories. I have one more headline for all of you today, and it's a little self-serving, but I think you all should know. Printing United Expo registration for 2023 event is currently open. This will take place October in Atlanta this year, October 18th through the 20th. I just want to, again, point out to everybody, Expo registration, this is a big deal for us, guys. And of course, we're all very proud that we won Best Industry Trade Show last year. And it's not a brag, it's more of a thank you to all of you for recognizing our efforts in the printing industry, but also to readdress and re-engage the apparel audience. We're super excited to be a part of this industry. We're really ramping up our efforts in the apparel printing segment. You're really going to see that this year at Expo. It's even bigger than it was last year. Of course, attendees get access to lots of really great educational opportunities. We have some awesome stuff this year planned for all of you. You get to see the latest equipment. And of course, you get to explore all of the other opportunities in printing. So I know most of you out there do apparel, but it's likely that you also expanded into other areas. Printing United Expo is the perfect place to really get your feelers out. I personally also like to use the Expo as a way to network. So I get to connect with all of you via video quite a bit. You all get to connect with each other via video quite a bit. There's nothing like connecting with each other in person. So hope to see all of you there. Drop by, say hi, introduce yourself. I love hearing your stories and what you've got going on in your various businesses and everyday lives. I've got for you, Eric, Terry, back to you guys.
All right, that was awesome. The recycled water bottle and the world's largest T-shirt. Tom Round from Shirt Lab. I don't know if he still holds the record for wearing the most T-shirts at one time. And when I talked to him about it once, he's like, it was all fun and games at the beginning, and then it starts pressing in on you, and he goes, I could barely breathe. And so when it was over, there's like two guys, they were like bodybuilders, ripping the shirts off of him. But
it sounds like a minor thing until if you see the video of Tom getting out of those shirts, it is epic. Like I've seen some viral videos of people trying this by themselves on social media, and they get in not a fraction of the way Tom got in and are freaking out trying to get back out of these shirts. It's not a small thing. Though, I do love that.
And a reflection of Tom Round, because if Tom hears about something, he'll be like, I bet I could do that. And then
he's usually right. He's usually right. But love all the stories you had. And Cassie, thank you very much for that awesome news segment. Always fantastic. And especially, guys, go check out all the stuff going on in the apparel. She's got awesome articles coming out at all times. The video is always on. You got to check that out. And Printing United Expo coming up. I mean, Terry, you've been to it. It is an incredible event.
It is. It's a huge show. It's the largest decorator show in the country, second only to FESPA in India and Europe. And it's you can hopefully they'll have the fishbowl again, and the two regular guys will be broadcasting live from the fishbowl. In fact, we have a meeting next week with the folks from Printing United and talking about doing a little promotion. We're going to have some of the folks from there on the show in the coming months, and it's around the corner. We're all going to be in Atlanta, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So get registered. I always say this: you've got to go to this show at least once.
Yeah.
Now, Now Ford, who's the chairman, says, "Oh, Terry, every year, tell people to go every year." But you get to see the enormity of the industry by going to the show, and I've talked about this, I know, but they're doing car wraps in one aisle, but they're not wrapping Chevy Volts, they're wrapping Maseratis. It's just and Eric, and when the show ends, as soon as the show ends, the first ones out are all the cars, and there's just like a line of these classic cars driving out the back of only the vendors get to see that, but followed by 1 year the Equipment Zone fire truck. So.
That was awesome, by the way. The Equipment Zone fire truck was awesome. All right, before we go any further, we got a couple of people coming in. We got some regulators joining in. I just wanted to go ahead and say hi. We got Todd over at Fat Dad Wholesale saying, "Good morning, all." Good morning, Todd. Got Jerry coming in. Good, Jerry Delhammer. Good morning, regulators. And Mo Boyd is in. Good morning, Mo. So we got some folks joining in already, as well as Kingsbury Crass. And this is true. Todd mentioning. So Tom's just getting a lot of love today. Tom also runs 100+ mile marathons. He's broken. I think the word that the kids would use is cracked, man. Yeah, he is cracked. He's really good at what he does. And I think endurance is what he does. He really does it well.
Well, and he also owns a craft beer brewing company. So
yes,
I get a little misty every time I think about it.
We may or may not have had a few barley pops ourselves over the years. We also have Ramona coming in saying, "Good morning, fellas." So good morning, Ramona. Though, once again, before we get into anything further, we have something that is always here that endures from show to show, and that is the dad joke. And today we've got one. We got a little spicy dad joke ready to go. Something that people hopefully will enjoy, but I like it.
So Eric, what's our rule? The two things we don't talk about: religion and politics, right?
Yeah, never. Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Religion. Here we go.
So,
all right, Eric. What do you call someone who only believes 12.5% of the Bible?
I don't know. What do you call someone who only believes in 12.5% very precisely of the Bible?
An atheist.
Okay, now everybody expects me to groan and moan on this, but this is probably my favorite one you've ever put in because that is a solid wordplay. I enjoyed that. I'm just going to say, I still explained it in the parentheticals for you guys who are in the podcast. I did put atheist in parentheses, spelled out correctly so everybody could get it. But that is probably one of the better jokes I think you've done on the show.
All right, so, Todd, do your best to top that.
Yeah. Yes, he says Jesus approves. Okay, sorry. Okay, we know, mea culpa. And Amy says love it. So yeah, hey, that was a good one, folks.
Awesome. All right, well, Eric, before we go any further, we want to thank everybody for checking out the Two Regular Guys podcast. We are always looking for new guests, maybe even today. And if anyone would like to join us, go to calendly.com/2. The number 2, regular guys, with your show ideas. If you are listening to the podcast version of the show, we would appreciate you sharing the Two Regular Guys with all of your industry friends so they can become regulators too. Here, show number 501, right? Or was
yes,
it 500? Did we do 501 last week?
I think it was 501, but I'll be honest with you. I just keep showing up. I don't know. Even as the producer, I just keep showing up. I don't worry about those numbers until there's a big one coming up.
All right. Well, we would appreciate you giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts, wherever you do your podcast listening. It's always helpful for us if you guys go in there and do a review. We'd like it to be a positive review, and please don't comment that he told a religious joke, so I'm never tuning in again. If you're watching us live right now, please join in with your comments and your questions. And what's the plan, Eric? Do we have a guest yet?
We don't currently have a guest. Zach has not joined us yet. So what we're going to do, folks, is go off script, as we are known to do anyway. But if Zach shows up, if we can get him in, if he shows up in the green room, which only I can see as producer, which unfortunately for Terry means he is at the whims of whatever I tell him is happening, then we'll get Zach in and start talking. Other than that, we're going to be open. So if you guys have questions who are live, you have questions, comments, things about, let's stay on the topic of, he said, becoming self-made as a decorator. Let's talk about our ways of being a decorator, our journeys of becoming decorators. And I think that's something we can start on. But if you guys have questions, comments, things you want to ask, hey, at this point, embroidery tips, screen printing tips, I think we got you covered for that much. So, Terry, let's start with you. I mean, I know you always say you told stories a million times, but you have a great story. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Well, hey, and by the way, I do know that Zach, I know he's got to be trying, because when I asked him to be on the show back in Atlantic City, he was super excited. He goes, I love the two regular guys. I would love to be on the show. So I'm sure he's out there trying.
I know we make jokes, guys. Don't throw shade at Zach. This is probably not Zach's thing. He's off at a live show and had a conflict. So it's hard to get in sometimes. You think you can, sometimes you can't. But like I said, if he gets in, we'll jump in. Otherwise, we're going to chat. So feel free. Like I said, if you're live, connect with us. Let's chat.
Well, as I always say, armed with my degree in journalism from Ohio University, I accidentally became a screen printer, and it all came from working my way through college. And I worked summers at Cedar Point Amusement Park. I worked the school year. I worked 20, 30 hours a week at the campus bookstore, back then though, I went to school in the 70s, and my hairstyle was different then. But I mean, it wasn't too long though, because I was also president of my fraternity junior and senior year. So a lot of rugby shirts, painter pants. People are out there laughing from the 70s. I know, but working at the bookstore, I worked for the soft goods buyer, and that's what we are, soft goods. And she was always complaining that she couldn't get product in time. And my senior year, I said, what'd be cool is if I would buy equipment, you bring it in blank and I print it for you. And she's like, oh, that's an awesome idea. We should do that. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that would be pretty cool. And I used to sit in her office while all the other employees were down there pricing books and loading boxes and carrying 40-pound boxes here and 40-pound boxes there. I was sitting in her office. I even had a desk, and I would sit there and read Impressions magazine that was like 200 pages then, and I'll bet I can do this. So so after I graduated, I bought equipment, had never seen it done before, really. Bought Scott Fresner's book, How to Print T-shirts for Fun and Profit, the first year it was out, and taught myself to be a screen printer, and never left, because it's Hotel California. Once you're in this industry, you don't leave. It's all the same headaches of any other business. You can dealing with employees, and anybody out there who has employees who's listening right now, just sighed. But and I went from just me to at one point having 75 production floor employees. So that is a life all into itself. I mean, you are full-time babysitter, mom, dad, counselor in chief, and getting stuff out the door.
By the way, also producing shirts. What do we always say about it? Doing a good job and getting it out on time. That's how
exactly right. Do good work, get it out delivered on time. That's the secret. But and that's and I was naive. Luckily, and it's kind of funny, because I heard Zach speak one time, and he talks about I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I just jumped in, and sometimes you can research yourself to death, and sometimes you just need to dive in, and of course, Eric, you've heard me say this before. I assumed everybody who started a business tried to learn everything there was to know about that business, and I realized very quickly, no. Now I can print 2 color prints. I'm happy. I don't simulated process, puff ink. No, that feels like work. I really don't want to come in this weekend. So, so I started that business. Sold out to one of my competitors about I can't even remember now, 6-7 years in. And of course, I thought when they offered to buy my business, really, you want my home built exposure unit? You want my little Antag manual press? You want my Hicks dryer? No, they wanted my customers. And I thought, holy cow, you were in business 20 years before me. Those customers were all here. Why didn't you have them? Not a very good screen printer. And so I even offered to do some training for their new staff. And I offered 2 weeks of training. I did one because the second week they all went on vacation. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm out of here.
Wow.
And I started running bigger and bigger and bigger production shops around the country. And another eye-opening thing, it was, I would walk into a shop that was doing, say, $3-4 million, all the same issues that I was having when I was, printing in my basement. And I thought, no matter how big you are, it's still screen printing, it's still embroidery, it's still
100%.
sublimation, and all those people suffer from the same issues. And most of those big companies started in somebody's garage. Jones & Mitchell Sportswear in Kansas City, they sold out to a company back in Ohio years ago. But when I went there, they were doing $3.5 million in sales and couldn't get product out the door. I mean, they were falling over themselves. Why? Because it was two guys getting their MBA at University of Kansas. They started screen printing Beacom Hawk T-shirts, and we're selling thousands of them out of their fraternity house, and said, let's not get real jobs. Let's be screen printers. And they did, and they grew the business. They had Mike Mitchell's wife, Betsy, was a really, really awesome artist. And so she created these beautiful lines, and they would sell them to all these campus bookstores, could not turn the product around. So I went out, actually met, interestingly enough, at SGIA, Printing United in Atlanta. And I met Mike Mitchell, the president of the company, and I was trying to sell him a precision oval. And about 30 minutes into the conversation, he goes, so really the reason I was interested in talking to you, what do you think about coming out and running our production operation? And I said, listen, I just took this job. I don't think so. But I went out to consult, and I went out for 2 weeks for a 2-week consultation, and I left 6 years later. So I will say this. Couldn't get product out the door at $3 million.
Yeah.
When I left, we were doing $13.5 million dead on deliveries. So it got to be the point, and that's where I had 75 employees. It got to be the point, though, where it was running so smoothly that the challenge was gone. So I said, I'm going to back away now. I've got all these supervisors trained. We've got all these great employees. I'm going to go find another case that needs to be solved, another production floor that needs to be fixed. And I went on to a couple of other jobs. And then, of course, how to print T-shirts for fun and profit.
Yeah.
Scott Fresner, I run into, and Scott, Pat Fresner wrote that book. And so I run into Scott when I'm flying from Maryland. I was running a production shop in Waldorf, Maryland, and ran into Scott at the airport because I was flying to Kansas for my sons. Both my sons were in the same fraternity, and it was Dad's weekend. And so I was flying out there, ran into Scott, and he was asking me, what I was doing, this and that. And he said, Pat and I were just talking about you. What would you think about coming to Phoenix and helping us with this new software program and helping us with our screen printing classes? And I'm like, well, I've never been to Phoenix, but yeah, I'm interested in that. So 6 weeks later, here I am in Phoenix.
Yeah, right.
6 weeks later, 21 years ago.
Yeah, right. I think Phoenix agreed with you very well. What I love about hearing your story again, number one, for all of you guys who don't know, where you're like, oh, Terry's the equipment zone guy. I'm like, no, Terry's not the equipment zone guy. He's not just the equipment zone guy. Terry really has run real big contract work that is massive. And so when we talk about production scheduling and efficiencies, I come from what is like the mom and pop shop level. I come from the level where we are a local shop. We've got multi-decoration options, but we're running 60 odd heads of embroidery. So that's not crazy. I mean, if you go see like the emblem companies, they have machines with 50 heads on them. Like, so I come from the kind of the general bread and butter shop that you might see in your own city, or your own smaller city, right? Not the big contract shops, but more of the custom shops. It's awesome to hear about those efficiencies. And I will 100% agree. Throughout my career arc, and maybe we'll get into that later if we still don't have Zach later. The thing that it's awesome to listen to, and that I will fully agree with, having done consulting after the fact and working with larger shops than the one I came from, is that the base problems are really elemental. A lot of them really are just the problems of any business for the business side, and the problems of any shop for the production side. It's efficiencies, it's how to do the work. And you're right. There's really something to this concept of deciding to learn it all. The people who didn't know, I was the same kind of person. I didn't know that you didn't know everything, so I just tried. I just kept throwing myself at it until I figured stuff out, and learning as best I could along the way. And I think that makes the difference for a lot of folks. It's not that you can't do the job without doing that, but I think there's a certain kind of folks where you do continue to analyze and work and reflect on things, and it makes you improve along the way. But it's super cool to hear that, man.
Well, exactly right. And I think that especially when you get employees, you have to learn how to simplify the process, make sure, make it easy to understand. And I think that's for both of us, Eric, I think that's doing that sort of thing has really spun us into doing articles and doing and doing the seminars and things like that, because my early seminars was basically, this is what I'm teaching my production crew. Now I'm going to teach you so you can go teach your production crew, and but Eric, talk about your start though. You didn't start as a guy on an embroidery machine, right?
Absolutely not. I was never intended to do this. This is not what I was supposed to do. Or at least that's what nobody expected me to do. By the way, the other thing is,
Erich
I was
Campbell
not a natural
accidentally
artist.
became an embroiderer.
Oh yeah. And here, which I actually have done in live seminars. I'm going to cop something from Terry, which he always does. He says, you give him credit once. Well, here's me giving him credit publicly. Armed with my degree in English and medieval studies, I became an embroiderer. So yeah, I've got the same kind of arc where I went. And also I finished my degree while I was a digitizer. While I was a full-time digitizer, I finished my degree because I actually took time off in the middle, because I did something just like a lot of folks have done, where as you get into this industry, you start working it. And very much like the story you told about the shop you were working with, that you were kind of helping out. I came in and was like, all right, I got my degree. I finished up. And as I finished up my degree, I'm like, so beginning professors make the same money I do doing the thing I already do and enjoy. Cool. Also, I graduated right after the 2008 financial crash. And as you can imagine, medieval studies on the chopping block for a lot of universities. There were not a lot of positions to go to. And I just thought, you know what? I'm doing what I do. I like what I do. I was already writing. I had been writing then for about 3 years. And so I was like, I'm teaching. I was always going to be a professor of some sort. So if you guys get into my classes and you ever go, wow, this guy sounds like he really wants to be a college professor. Yeah, I kind of was. That was that was the plan. If you get a lecture hall class from me, that's probably why. That's where I was. I lived in academia. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Two things I need to bring up though, which is kind of funny. Terry talks about having the companies where they shut down, they sell out, and somebody gets those customers. I come from a company that died, that was bought up, and the company you guys all know me from bought the failed company that I was at, and I was one of the employees they brought over, and they said, we don't know what to do with you. And I got in. They already had Digitizer. They already had everything else. I built all of their websites. I built all of their e-commerce, and I started doing the digitizing. And much to the great chagrin of the original digitizer who eventually left, I supplanted him in that position as well. He became a manager of the embroidery department and was not particularly fond of that.
Or you.
Or me. Yeah. Oh, definitely not me. Yeah. But I know how that feels. So the funny thing is, you're saying, oh yeah, I'm just teaching people stuff that everybody else taught. When I first started writing blog posts, this is things that I really don't say publicly much, but I'm just going to be candid today. It was, here are all the things happening at my company that I wish somebody would do something about. Because I wasn't the person running the company. I was one of the people who was working for the company, even though I had roles that were managerial in little areas. Like I was the entirety of digitizing in the art department, and I was the e-commerce manager all these years. So it's like I ran little segments of the company, but had to answer to a decision maker. And so I started writing a lot of these things like, if anyone were listening, this is what's actually happening in the company. This is what we should probably be doing. But the way I started, very much like Terry, I just thought, hey, there was a way to do things. But I originally was just hired on for summer help. I was a teenager. First thing I ever did in the apparel industry was get into a back of a box truck and huck 80-pound boxes, jerseys boxes back and forth to customers. So I rode around with the delivery guy. That was my job. After a while of riding around the delivery guy, we had our embroidery operator needed a hand. We had some older machines that need to be put back into production. And she's like, you want to learn how to run the machines? And immediately I'm like, oh, something technical and potentially nerdy that was cool. I'm like, yeah, I want to run a big machine. We had these 12-head Tajimas. We had really old Melco Starlets. If you're an embroiderer right now, you're laughing because I ran a Melco Starlet. These are old, not great machines that ran weird file formats. But jumped in, learned that, and I became an operator. And it wasn't a long time that I was an operator only, but I was an embroidery operator. And the joke I always make is we kind of call ourselves watchers, because the machines I ran between 1 and 2 12 heads that didn't have thread break sensors. So you ran up and down the aisle watching each of the machines run, because if there was a thread break, you had to stop the machine manually and back it up. So you just watched every single piece running. And I think that was massively formative for me, because I really got to understand the stresses that were on the embroidery. Because boy, there is nothing like making a mistake when you know there's no thread break sensors, especially as a digitizer starting out. But one day I look in the corner of the place. I'm like, what's that? There's a computer under this big dust cover in the corner. It's been there like the whole time I'm there. I was like, what is that? Because me being a geek and a nerd, I was like, oh, is that internet connected? Is there something I could be doing with that? Is that something technical I can play with? I was like, I see it's connected to stuff. I see it's over there powered up. What is it? And the little single head machine that was over there that I always wanted to run, my machine that people tease me about, the little brother commercial machine I had, BAS 415, still love it to this day. That was all over there. And it was also the newest machine in the shop. We're like, all right, what is that? And operator says, oh, it's the machine for making the files for this thing. Nobody wants to mess with it. And I'm like, oh, I sure do. I'm like, you can control this. We don't have to wait for someone in Texas to mail us a floppy disk or to, eventually to email us stuff. I mean, I was just on the edge of that stuff. People were still old school punching tapes. I was like, no, but we have the thing, just nobody knows how to use it. Went to the boss, asked about it. And what I always say is the boss graciously gave me all the time that I wanted after work to do whatever I wanted learning. So I worked these 20-hour days, half unpaid. Slept under my desk sometimes, ran those machines, ran the single head, tested, and kept on going. And within 3 months, I was doing full commercial production at a shop that, had 60 odd heads. And I became the digitizer, not knowing. Later on, when I talk to people, they're like, oh yeah, you get good after maybe like 2-3 years. Back in the day, they used to think there was this arc where about 1 year you can start to do production. And then about 3 years in, you're pretty good. I was like 3 months and I was doing production for major brands, because we were selling into department stores and stuff. So like the other joke I tell is like my first really poor job, the worst thing that I probably did, my very first hat job, I didn't know was done for my boss's friend. We just did this job for his kids' graduating class for Paramus High School. And I knew nothing. I had connections in New York and back east. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing this kid's thing. It turns out that kid was the son of one of the muckety mucks at Nautica, at the clothing brand Nautica. So unbeknownst to me, my very first job that was very poorly done was for one of the heads at Nautica's son. So unbeknownst to me this whole time, I remember the first time like doing lighthouses for Nautica, having no idea that we were doing this major brand's work. I didn't really understand any of it. But the thing I always talk about was that I learned largely by myself. It was only well into this process, and it's kind of funny, by accident, that I found a trade magazine. It was in one of the desks at I believe in the art department. They moved me up to the art department eventually as I became more and more involved in art and I wasn't operating as much. Then they moved me up into the art department. I went into the dark room with the artist, which I thought was the coolest thing ever, because now I was real, bona fide. I'm in the art department. I got closer to the front desk. That's what I always say, as close as you are to the front windows, the better off you were doing. And I see this trade magazine and I'm like, people talk about this? You can learn from people who know what they're doing. There's something somebody else knows. and literally found an old one. And I'm like, I want more of these. Where do I get this? And I had no idea. And this is like early internet. You have to realize, guys, this is not massive adoption, not online magazines. None of that's really there. And I go to the boss like, oh yeah, we get those all the time. You want them? Just astounded. So my early heroes, even though I'm already in production, I'm already doing this. I have just learned everything by trial and error and from the manual we had from this old DOS program. Trial and error entirely. I finally find there's people, and those early heroes of mine were the people who were writing for the magazines. And it's funny because that was, so for me, the big thing was all that happened. I really started digitizing pretty hard in like 99 to 2000. That's my time. And after that, I got into these magazines and I started looking, and there's contests. And early on in like 2006, I enter my first contest. I'm super excited. I enter my first contest and I win. And Nicole Rollander, who we all know, over at Stitches Magazine says, hey, we're doing this blog thing. Do you think you could write for this blog? And I was on board. I had a website since I was in, first taking college courses when I was real young. And when the internet was weird and we had it based out of the website from the university, we had our individual little pages we could write ourselves. So started writing for the blogs, and that was it ever since. I haven't stopped writing and teaching since 2006. But the entire thing was, after I saw these people teaching the magazines, I'm like, man, I wish I had that. And I thought about all of the things that I had to learn by just trying and failing and starting over, that somebody could have helped. And it would have been fantastic to have had a mentor or someone to teach me.
Yeah.
Because especially back then, even when I met one of the local people who digitized, who had originally digitized for the shop, she was not pleased that I had taken over there, number one, because I completely eliminated the revenue stream. And on top of it, like, didn't want to talk shop, didn't want to give things away. And eventually I heard back, was fairly unhappy that I was writing in the magazines and writing for the blogs, because it came out that she was just like, you're giving away the secrets. You're giving away the sauce. Like, you keep on teaching people stuff without asking, without teaching a class, without paying for it, making people pay for it. You're giving out the secrets. So yeah, it's it was a very different world than it is now.
Oh, absolutely. It's so funny, Eric, when you said, my blogs, I was just writing about what was going wrong at my shop.
Yeah.
When I was at Jones and Mitchell Sportswear, there'd be some crisis going on, and in accounting or whatever, and I'd be making notes, and the president of the company would look over and he goes, "You're going to write an article about this, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're going to mention our names?" Nah. Because at the time I was doing a column for screen printing impressions and a magazine that's no longer around called Screenplay. And so I needed a lot of content. So, but of course.
But that's it, right? It's what we always talk about. People get worried about making their own content too. I was tell them, like, you just document. You're already doing it. It's actually much harder on the other side sometimes, I think. When I was on the shop floor, I had no end of content because I was constantly running headlong into the same problems everybody else was. So now it's more about consulting with folks and helping them through problems. And then I learned through having to formulate that for people. As you said, making it simple for people is part of how we get this going. And it's also, I think it's a kind of a mission statement for us. But I believe that it's because, very much like our guest wanted to talk about, because a lot of it was when you're working by yourself, when you are, and I hate to say self-made, because my operator helped me. The people who wrote the manual for my software, whatever I say about that software back in the day, they tried. They gave us as much as they could. And then when I eventually found the trade magazines, there were people like us, even back then, who were teaching and writing and giving us that kickstart. I mean, at least for me, and I don't know, I think, Terry, you probably had different experience because it was earlier that people made, even then, even less access.
Well, yeah, exactly right. And it was, I think the internet really helped open people up to sharing information. There was a lot of holding your cards pretty close, and or people in companies that didn't want, as me going in, I usually went in as the production or plant manager. And people there who didn't want to tell you what they did or how they did it, because that was their job security, not realizing that that you can actually grow your job by sharing, teaching other people, that sort of thing. So, and I don't know if you've done this, Eric, but I've literally written articles for the purpose of figuring out how to teach it to someone else.
100%.
And so I'll scheduling. I do a lot of articles on estimated production time and scheduling, and are used to, and so I would write an article about it, just in my own mind, be able to kind of piece it together so that it was easy for somebody to understand. Then I would go and have somebody on my production floor learn to do it. And I did a time study class when I was running a production floor one time, and it was one of those deals. And I know we've talked about it here on the show. For every 15 minutes, you write down what you were doing briefly, and then you go through and categorize it. And we figured out that I was spending 60% of my time on the production floor in some level of scheduling. Yeah. And so the person teaching the class said, that seems like something you could teach someone else to do. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. And of course, then that's when I had to lay it all out. Here's how I do it, and make it super easy. Hired a part-time person that came in who worked while her kids were in school. After she dropped them off, she came in, she left to go pick up the kids, and lifted a huge burden of time away from me. And so, and those are the kind of things you have to do when you're running a production operation. That take a look at what you're doing, and how can you make it more efficient? Can somebody else do that job? It's hard to let go. As we joke, how the book we're going to write, How to Micromanage Your Business to Success,
which is awesome, because that's
business.
Aaron jumped in from the airport, folks, and he says most of the two early guys were just what was happening around us. Micromanage your way to success. Yeah, exactly. Thinking the same thing, right? And of course, Aaron. Before I'll get a couple more comments that we have for the regulators, but Aaron also saying, "Airport, thanks for making it happen." Hey, thanks for always making it happen for us, Aaron. Take care of yourself, man.
Exactly.
No worries, we got you. But we have a couple other stories that I thought were worthwhile. And by the way, Jerry says about your story, it was such a great story, and I fully agree.
Awesome.
And Ramona has a lovely story too. She says, I was a quilter. I made quilts to donate and compete. One quilt needed some embroidery. I hired it out. It was terrible. I decided I could do it better. That was 12 years ago, and I haven't made a quilt since. No time. If you don't know, Ramona, a digitizer herself, who also digitizes for folks. So a source digitizer and an educator, and has her own show, by the way, on Saturdays. So Coffee and Conversation with Ramona, and she talks all about embroidery very much like I do. So I've had her in my classes, which I love too. It's something that Terry always talks about, where somebody is in your classes. Now, she was already doing her work before that, so I'm not going to say like I am somehow the source of the work she's doing, but it's so cool to see someone who's been in your classes then take up that mantle to go, I'm going to teach, I'm going to share, I'm going to do that too. And I'm like, man, that's so awesome. I'm just glad to be part of this chain of people who think that the right answer to this is to be open, be a little vulnerable, share stuff, and talk about this industry and keep it going, keep it alive, and keep it lively. I just love that.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned Scott Fresner. He was my hero, because he wrote the book, and then I started seeing the articles, that he was writing and things like that. And I remember calling home from a trade show about 10 years after I got into the industry, and I said, "Hey, I'm somebody in screen printing," and the response was, "Oh, really?" And I go, "Yeah, I was just walking through the trade show and saw Scott Fresner, and he said, 'Hey, Terry, how you doing?' I'm somebody." I'm like, Steve Martin in The Jerk.
I gotta say, same for me. Some of my early friends when I started writing were people who I had read previously. And it was like, but I remember at first going, oh my God, that's Bonnie. She's over there. She writes the articles for that. Now I know that we were all just normal people working jobs and writing at the same time. It's funny, but at the same time, the first meeting you had with people that wrote, especially if you were looking to them for that guidance, you were looking to them to help you through those times where, I can't lie, there's some dark nights of the soul when you are really in the trenches trying to get stuff working, and you feel like you're ready to quit, and you're like, other people have done this. These people are here with me. We've all had this. We kind of share this experience, and it helps you get through that stuff. I mean, it wasn't until much later that I got that, but when I did, I was pretty happy.
Well, one thing though, we when we're writing for the magazines, there's an editor there and saying, okay, is this correct? Or, hopefully we don't get too much of that anymore. But now it's oversharing all this information on the internet, and it's just like, it's so frustrating, because, and I talk to customers all the time, and they'll say, well, on the internet they said to do it like this. I'm like, Band-Aid, that's a Band-Aid. That they don't know how to do it, so they're teaching you how to put a Band-Aid on it to make it work. And there's so much of that. I know we've beat that horse over and over again for the last 10 years, but it's so frustrating because new decorators don't know the difference. And that's the problem. Somebody that has some experience can read an article or watch a video and go, that doesn't make sense because of this. A newbie is like, okay, I'll do it just like that. And I feel like in my screen printing classes, I spend half my time re-educating people from what they saw on the internet,
I'll say that the gracious way I usually put it is, you know what? There's more than one way to do this thing. Feel free to try them both, do time studies on it, and see what's faster for you, what works best for you. I will say 100%, there are very few things. I have one outstanding case where I tell people, no, everyone else is wrong. One outstanding case, 3D foam underlay. Don't use underlay to cut the edge of 3D foam. Just use the top stitching. I'm sorry, the underlay falls out of the sides, and that's why a lot of it looks bad. End of story. I would give it that 1 30-second blurb because it's the only one I ever say that where I'm like, nope, you're wrong. I don't like it. It doesn't work. Everything else, hey, we all know there's these different ways we can do things. It's why I teach the elements. I know you're very similar. We teach these things that are very close to how it works, not just if somebody wants to walk you through a project like a recipe. They're like, okay, tell me how to do this kind of design specifically. I'm like, no, let me tell you how stitches work. Let me tell you a little bit how the machine works. Let me tell you about the foundational ideas underneath the software you're using.
Yes.
And then any software you sit at, any machine you sit at, anything that you're working on, if you know that level, any abstraction on top of it, any automation can be broken down and you'll understand what's happening. And then you can address it in all these different ways. There's different ways to handle all the variables, but big but there, if you don't know how the base of the thing works, how the ink lays down, why screen mesh matters, why thread thickness matters, how density works, how pull compensation works. If you don't know these things about the very basic nature, then the technical stuff will get away from you. And I think it's somewhat similar in business, because I think what most of the problem people have is they just aren't measuring. They're not measuring, they're not looking, and they've grown like all of us did from the garage shop to the large shop. And you're doing garage shop stuff forever. You're working mom and pop stuff forever unless you stop and think, hey, was that just something we thought of on the fly and it worked, or was it actually sensible? You have to revisit this stuff throughout. It's different to have that kind of thought.
I wrote an article once entitled "Be Your Own Consultant," and it just talked about take a step back from your business, follow a garment through the process, step by step by step. Follow artwork through the process, step by step. And I did a consultation one time, and the owner of the company looked kind of agitated as I'm giving him my 40-page report. And he goes, Terry, we already know 80% of this. And I said, oh, I know. You're just not doing anything about it. So you had to hire me to come and tell you need to fix this. And he's like, yeah, you're exactly right. We knew it and we didn't do anything about it. So, I mean, honestly, people, that's most consultants, when they come into your shop, they're going to tell you something you already know. You can take that, you can save a few $1,000s, take a step back, say, I'm not going to answer the phone today. I'm not going to digitize today. I'm not going to do this today. I'm going to observe my business and try to determine how to make it better. And, as a production manager, I spent my days doing that. If anybody ever said, well, we're looking for a working production manager. Oh, you want somebody to run an automatic press and be in charge? No, thank you.
It's not a production manager, ultimately. I mean,
you
can do it, but yeah.
I'm in my office with multiple Excel spreadsheets, and the regulars listen to us all talk about our Excel spreadsheets because we're all nerds. And but calculating and saying, I didn't see this until I did the numbers. Then I realized, and when I do, I used to consult and do a consultation called double your production in 30 days.
Mm.
And screen printing shops, the production floor employees, well, the people running the presses, their eyes would get like saucers and go like, I can't print any faster. And a little known fact, in screen printing shops, the printing's the easy part. The printing is the part that most people have figured out. They just haven't figured out how to be efficient with everything else in their shops. You know, I've walked into 100 screen printing shops, automatic presses, manual presses, not a single press is running when I walk in. There's something wrong if nobody's printing shirts. And it's because you're not efficient with your setup. You're not efficient with your teardown. You're not efficient with having the art being complete. You're not efficient with pulling the product.
Absolutely.
And so, and I've done that in multiple shops, double their production time without doing anything different printing, just getting efficient with everything else. So,
you know, you're totally right. I mean, one of the things that I always teach in e-commerce is the same, and I have done the same thing with workflow and embroidery, have done the same thing in production. But I'm like, eat your own dog food. Once you build an e-commerce site, go and buy something. And yes, I do include like put your credit card in the processor, the whole thing. Yep, you're going to pay those fees to yourself. You know, we're just going to lose 3% to the processors. But you have to go through the entire process, including receiving the thing from your department, shipping it to your house, the entire process. If you don't eat your own dog food, if you don't try this stuff out for yourself and see how it really feels, you never really know. Now, admittedly, it's always good to bring in an outside person who hasn't already seen the process, because so many times we forget, like we've explained something to ourselves so much in our head that we think it's just the real way things should work. But so much of it can be solved by just saying, all right, put it in order and walk it. Like you said, walk it through. And the other thing that I was always surprised by with embroidery shops is how much loss there was in walking stuff around the floor. Literally walking stuff around the floor. I'm like, oh, we all have a printer that we go get our instructions from, and it's in the front office, and we're in a shop in the back, and everybody walks to the entire length of a football field back and forth over and over all day to go to the printer to get stuff. And I'm like, you ever guys thought about putting a networked printer in the back? And this is back before everybody was doing everything on actual networked systems where we had job management. They're going to go get paperwork every 2 seconds. And I'm like, okay, put the printer in the back and people pick it up when it's printed out. And that eliminated a mass chunk of time in the day, or that they didn't stage all of their jobs so they were easy to get to. So they were tripping all over themselves, moving around. It was literally the physical nature. Or the other thing that kills me, not having the right tools at each machine. The cost of a toolkit for each machine, so you have every Allen key and screwdriver that you need at that machine when you need it, instead of somewhere where we're all going to the tool chest every 5 seconds to get something, or someone has their favorite screwdriver that they're walking around the shop. It's just maddening, the little stuff that happens if nobody pays attention. And it's not, I don't think anybody's ever malicious. You just get used to it. You're a frog in a pot.
And it's hard to change. It's hard for people to change, of
course.
So, you know what? That we have new tools now. We have the internet now. We have better ways to do this. And so it's hard to make that change. But once people do, then they realize, and then they start looking for ways to make things better in your shop, So
you have to empower your people. That's what Terry says all the time.
Who knows more about a screen printing shop? Who knows more about an embroidery shop than the people doing the work? Ask them what would make your job easier. And if you implement things that they suggest, or tell them why you didn't, then they're going to come up with more things to help you. But if you are, because I said so, you're never going to grow as a business. So,
absolutely. I think that's the thing. Even the things that we say, you should always be analyzing and seeing what the fit is. We can tell you all these different things. And of course, we're also I gave you a tongue-in-cheek example where it's not really common anymore. If you've got a job management system, everybody's looking this stuff up at a tablet that's sitting next to their machine, or they're operating in a different way. Nobody's running the printer the same way it used to be. It's not job jacket time. We're not all manila folders like it was in my early career, but the same stuff is still true. Like, how many steps are you taking from piece to piece? And I always talk about artwork. Like you said, art approvals. Wow. The art approval process and not being on top of that will make an entire shop spin out. It's amazing how that can be, where you just don't make the requirements for the customer clear. You're like, this is your part of what we're doing together, customer. if you don't have this approval in time at this point, your production slot moves. We need the approval at this point for the production to continue on, and then stick to it. Stick to your guns. That is a hard thing to do, but if you're upfront with it, it really makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
A clean approval process, a clean process of getting information down the chain without it constantly being questions being asked back up the chain is massive to your production. And it's like you said, people always expect, whenever I ask about what people want me to teach them, it's teach me how to do 3D film. And I'm like, I kind of go, okay, I can do that. What other processes are not working in the business? Like what's going on with your workflow? Have you ever drawn a flow chart? Here's where I get nerdy. This is what actually taught me the most about my company and about so much I taught later down the road. I went through my company when we were working on onsite. I physically built the server that they were running on onsite before I left. So physically built the machine and installed and did all the stuff and helped to run onsite, which is a production management system. And I was like, all right, so I'm going to follow the jobs and I'm going to make a decision tree, a literal flow chart. How does information flow through the company? And this spun out into 5 trees of all of this information. I was like, there are massive recursions and problems all through it. Literally just drawing a line from place to place where that information was going before it got to production. And it blew me away. How many loops were in that system? How many things were spreading out where they shouldn't be? How many times people were working backward? And it taught me so much about the way information flows and how much more important it was than some of the stuff I teach. Now, don't get me wrong. If you can't embroider at the base level, if you don't know how to make the designs look good or run well, you can't do anything. But once you can, the stuff that trips you up is sneaks up on you is the stuff like production management, is the stuff like information management, is the stuff like watching how much time you spend on tasks, or like Terry said, not having people in the right places when you need them. That like with scheduling.
Yeah.
Sometimes you really do need to change roles or get new people in, and it makes more sense because you can go after more business once you've freed yourself from that stuff.
I went into a shop once and they had, the paper order, the job jacket going through, and it was like 10 pages in there. And I'm like, what is all this?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, different people need different things. So I said, okay, here's the deal. So I gave the art department one color marker, and I gave, every department had their own color of Sharpie, or not a Sharpie, but a highlighter.
Yeah.
And I said, whatever you use on every order this week, highlight it.
Yeah.
And so about 20% of the things were highlighted by someone. The rest was just never looked at. So I went into order entry and I said, here's the deal. These are the only items that need to be on the order. And of course, their heads were exploding. But what if there's a catastrophe and somebody needs more information, somebody could call the customer, but it's just, and people were just like leafing through pages, and I'm out there on the production floor observing, and I'm watching them leafing through all these pages. I'm thinking, what is going on here? Let's make this clean. Let's make this simple. Let's make this show end on time. Eric.
All right. With that, we are about out. I'm going to go ahead and bring a couple more user comments in. User comments. Wow, you can tell I've done support before, haven't you? Listener comments, viewer comments, reciprocators, shall we? All right. So we have a couple more folks in. Ramona says, I agree. This is about the website testing. Build your website, work it before taking it live. I have a friend who does test orders for me. She's great. Lets me know where the flow issues are. Yeah, flow is everything, folks. Really, you cannot stress that enough. Where people stop is where they also change their minds, especially in the purchasing process. If you encounter friction, they're more likely to change their minds and not tip. That's just a sales tip from me to you. Make it easy. If people are trying to give you money, make it real easy for them to give you money. And then Jan says, it's the little things. Having a pair of scissors on each machine. Yeah, absolutely. If they don't have trimmers in their hand, what are they doing? You're an embroiderer. You should live with one of those. But for real, it's just important to have that. And Ramona says, which I love, all my machines are within 4 feet of each other, but each has its own tool set. And this is the thing I always think about with production. I remember listening to a chef talk about mise en place, which is preparing your area. And he's like, everything stays clean. You work clean. As you're working, you clean up. And you have everything prepped for the particular dish. You do all of your prep work, and you could blindfold me and I could reach any of my tools and start working. I wouldn't have to look. I could reach my hand out and touch anything that I need in my area. And I'm like, that is how the operating area should be for any machine. You should be able to reach out and touch the thing you need. For
Can
real.
you hand me the scissors is something you should never hear.
Scissors are cheap. Time is expensive. Labor is expensive. All right. So with that, I think we are at the end of our show. But let's first just kind of go through the stuff we usually do, Terry. What do you have coming up?
I have my complete screen printing business course. I'm going to actually be right here in Phoenix this weekend at Workhorse Products. I think we still have a couple of slots open. If anybody's in the area and wants to go to a screen printing class, I'll be at Atlas Screen Supply next weekend, June 10th and 11th. I'm not sure if that one's sold out. That class sells up pretty quickly. I'm going to be, I'll be seeing Cassie. I'll be with Equipment Zone at the Apparel Decoration Summit in Nashville. That's June 12th and 12th through 14th. So yes, I get home Sunday night at 10:30. I leave for the airport at 3 a.m. to go to Nashville. And I'll be joining Eric and Aaron in Fort Worth this fall. I'm going to be speaking on DTG and DTF printing, and I'm going to be moderating a panel that includes our guests from today.
Nice.
So
you'll still have a chance to hear from him.
And otherwise, watch for all my upcoming events at terrycombs.com. How about you, Eric?
Well, I have, as always on Friday, the Take Up coming up. And this day we have episode 154, so not quite to 500 on my end yet. But should I digitize my own design? So this is an evergreen question from embroiderers and erstwhile digitizers alike. Does it make sense to do digitizing yourself or in-house? We're going to discuss why you would want to or not, when and how you can make the transition, and discuss kind of this dovetailing method I often recommend that allows you to keep sourcing. And we talk about that balance between outsourcing and doing things yourself and why. So head over to ericcampbell.com and click the Take Up tab at the top of the links, and I will be live at 2:30 Mountain Daylight Time, apparently, to jump in and share your insights with me, and I would love to see you there. Also, as Terry said, upcoming classes are going for Impressions Expo, so if you're going to Fort Worth, you'll have a chance to see me. The first thing is presenting the value of embroidery, so this is more about sales, presentation, how you get people to fall in love with the concept of embroidery and how you make it show its best self to your customers. And we're working out potentially something else about digitizing techniques, but cross your fingers, hasn't been fully worked out yet. If it happens, there should be something fun as well. For those of you, I know I joke around about you don't need the technique as much as you need the process and the sales, but I still really do love teaching the technique. So you guys will be able to get a little bit of that from me.
All right.
And
Aaron says that there is still time to register for Start Here Academy in Indianapolis the day before the Graphics Pro Expo, which is it will be on the evening of June 14th. And he says it is shaping up to be an amazing event. You can go to the OSG link /SHA for Start Here Academy.
And that's a lot of other self-made people talking about their work. So if you're into it, you're somebody just starting out and you want to learn more about just getting going, Start Here Academy is really awesome. And Aaron does a fantastic job as an MC over there. So I would absolutely go check out both what he's presenting and how he does that MC work. He keeps all that stuff running.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So with that, we've come to the close of another show. Thank you very much to Zach for trying to show up. We hope we can get you on again. But I'm going to say thank you, Terry, for leading us off with your story. I mean, you can always say, oh, you've heard it a million times. I've heard it, and I love listening to your story every time because I still think there's always new stuff there. And on top of it, it really encompasses an arc in the industry that I think is important for people to discuss. So thank you very much for sharing, Terry.
Absolutely. You as well, Eric. Love hearing your story as well. Starting moving boxes. So also thanks for being our show producer and more than part-time co-host.
Well, next week, hopefully, we've got Angelica Angel Powers joining us talking about building your brand, how to make sales and influence people. And so we'll, like I said, we'll try and reschedule Zach, but jump in next time to see what Angelica has to share with us.
Yeah, I believe she is one of the speakers at Start Here Academy, I think.
Awesome.
So.
Awesome.
All right. Until then, I'm Terry Combs. He's Eric Campbell.
And we are the two regular guys.
Here we go. We're out.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Two Regular Guys. Check out our website at tworegularguys.com. That's the number 2, regularguys.com. You can also interact with us over at our Facebook page, facebook.com/2regularguys, or send us a tweet, twitter.com/2regularguys. And we have a YouTube page. You can find all that from our website, 2regularguys.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to spending some time with you again next week.